Hello, this is Skylit Lake reading Long Night in the Valley by Marileus. Chapter 12. The scene shifted the moment Tempest woke up. They were outside, on a street in the middle of the city. Storm clouds circled overhead. Tempest stood in front of them, hands in her pockets, a bland expression on her face. "So," she drawled, "you're Nine's friends." Said Ochako, taken aback, right after 4 had said she wouldn't talk to them. This was disconcerting. "Yes?" "I'm his teacher," said Aizawa, stepping forward. "Yeah? You think you're doing a good job raising up little child soldiers?" "Excuse me," said Aizawa. "You heard me." She shifted her gaze to Ochako, then to Todoroki and Ida. "I bet Soma told you I wouldn't be talking to you." "He did say something along those lines, yes," said Ida, even as Ochako worked very hard to elbow him. "I can follow why he'd think that," said Tempest. "I spent most of my life fighting against the government. Lord knows I wouldn't have approved of him choosing a pro-hero to follow after him." She took her hands out of her pockets to make air quotes. She was wearing brass knuckles. Whatever a pro-hero is supposed to be. Government lackeys, cops, and war criminals with different names. I'm shocked he pulled a halfway decent person from the muck. "We're not war criminals," protested Ida. "Oh yeah? I forgot the Geneva Conventions was next, wasn't it? They had this big meeting and decided none of it applied to metahumans, and then BAM! Everyone's a metahuman, so it doesn't apply at all, huh? Neat, right?" "What we're doing now might not be what you're used to," said Ochako, "but it's the way society works now." "And we're not killing people like you did," said Ida. Ochako winced at his combative addition. "I did what I had to get people out of those torture camps," said Tempest. "People like my little sister. You know what they did to her? They thought her power was just controlled by her voice, so they cut her vocal cords." "They don't do that anymore," said Todoroki. "You think a government like that is just going to stop doing things without people making them, without them being forced?" Tempest laughed and looked away at the swirling sky. "Maybe you do, you're just kids after all, but tell me this. Do you think they didn't know exactly what was happening to your family, Todoroki Shoto?" Aizawa cleared his throat. "What's your point here?" he asked. "What do you want from us?" Tempest looked back at Aizawa. The coldness in her brown eyes made Ochako shiver. "We could have kept you out," she said. "That Suzuki idiot too. But do you know why we didn't?" "Enlighten us," said Aizawa. "Because the way we do it would cause irreparable brain damage. We know because we've done it before. I thought it was worth it, but the others didn't want to hurt Nine's friends." "Are you implying that we aren't Midoriya's friends?" asked Todoroki, frowning. Tempest huffed and the winds whipped down the road, making Ochako cover her face. "No, to be honest, I'm not completely sold on Nine either. He wanted to be part of the system so bad, and not to mention..." She huffed again. "At least he knows what it's like to be on the other side of the equation. You 4, though, I don't owe you anything, and you're causing all these problems. What I want from you..." Behind her, lightning snapped down from the sky. is to prove to me you're worth it. Vlad, the police were able to find your car, said Paoloda, holding his hand over the receiver of the staff room telephone. Oh, thank goodness, said Vlad. I hate taking public transport. He paused. I mean, did they find Yagi? Is he alright? No, they didn't find Yagi, answered Paoloda. Great, said Vlad. So ask them when I can pick it up. Why are you making that face? Did Yagi total it? I bet he did. Symbol of peace, my... No, interrupted Paoloda. Yagi didn't total it, or crash it. It was parked in an alley near the Mustafa Entertainment District, where Midoriya had that fight with Hawks, said Vlad, putting his head in his hands. It got wrecked by one of them, didn't it? No, said Paoloda. It was parked in an alley. They found it on security camera. It isn't there anymore. They took it? The League of Villains took it, answered Paoloda. You're joking. I wish I was. The bus felt empty with half the class missing. The remaining 1A students, plus Shinso, were all huddled together at the front, mooching off the teacher's mobile hotspot. Did my email go through yet, Carol? Asked Suyu, leaning over her seat to look at Denki's computer. Not yet, said Denki. I've got all the pictures you guys sent arranged, but I wish we had more video material. Ashido was the one of the most, he sighed. Ashido, gossip queen, when you wake up, I will apologize for all your comments about your hobbies. I have some videos on Midoriya, said Mineta. Trust us, Mineta. No one wants your videos, said Yarozu. Huh, why not? Tell us this. How many of your videos are actually of Midoriya and don't just have him incidentally in the background while you're trying to film girls? Said Yarozu. None of them, said Mineta, obviously not seeing why this was wrong. Why would I film Midoriya? Mike, said Midnight, please remind me to sign up that walking lawsuit for some sensitivity classes. How did Eraser miss this? Unfortunately, Shoto is about as sexual as the average rock, so, replied Mike. Remind me to sign him up for some training too, then, replied Midnight. Will do. Walking lawsuit? Asked Mineta. Everyone else sighed. Then Denki's laptop pinged. Huh, I just got an email from Principal Nezu. The adults, including Greenlight, the bus driver, blanched. The adults were bothered by the weirdest things. In the end, Nezu was just a guy with a quirk, right? A hero even. Principal Nezu, the education hero. Okay, he scared Denki. Mr. Terrible grades, a lot in elementary and middle school, but really. Okay, the crane thing at the final exam had been low-key terrifying, but he was trying to get past that. Huh, repeated Denki, having read the email. That's interesting. What is it, my electric friend? Asked Ayuma, draping himself sideways across his seat. Ayuma-san, said Midnight, do not put your feet on the windows. Principal Nezu sent me a link to an All Might Adopt a Kid fanfiction, and it's by... Midoriya writes fanfiction? Asked Shoji, evidently surprised into using his real mouth to speak. That's cute, Kero, said Suyu. It must have been before he met the real All Might, though. No, said Denki. It was last updated a couple of weeks ago, and well, Midoriya didn't write it. So, who did? Not Nezu, right? Jiro asked, winding her earphone jack around her finger. "There's no way, right, Kaminari?" asked President Mike nervously. No, it's All Might, according to Nezu." A beat of silence. Dinky inserts his pinky into his right ear, trying to clear it out. Man, if the Baku squad had been here rather than the quiet half of the class. Yeah, it says here that this serves All Might right for working on this during school hours. More silence. "Green light, the road!" "Whoops, sorry." "Hey guys, I was sure that All Might didn't, kidnap Midoriya rather than the other way around." Gran Torino, also known as Torino Sorihiko, was an active hero. That meant late nights and late mornings. He was also an old man, a very old man. Late mornings often turned into noons and afternoons. Sometimes during those noons and afternoons, he liked to ignore technology and the outside world for a good while. Maybe read a paper a little bit, or one of those terrible romance novels Nana had left him in her will. Still, he was a hero, one wrapped up in something best described as a 200-year-long shadow war. So eventually, he did turn on the news. Only to see Toshinori's boy fighting hawks on live television. Not to mention Toshinori hanging out in the background with a head shaved. And the header said, UA student Midoriya Izuku kidnaps symbol of peace. Which is the dumbest thing he's ever heard, and under other circumstances he would have been on the floor laughing. Gran Torino was an old man, but luckily he only felt like he was simultaneously having a heart attack and a stroke. His body was more than functional enough to place a not at all panicked phone call to one Tsukachi Naomasa. Tsukachi Naomasa was incredibly busy. The busyness was divided mostly evenly between desperately trying to find his best friend, who had evidently decided to make a hopefully brief foray into kidnapping teenagers, and try to figure out what the commission was taking, because it had to be illegal. Oh, and putting together a complaint that the commission was infringing on police prerogatives. Honestly, he wasn't sure how much traction that would get, since pro heroes had been steadily getting more and more responsibilities, even as the police were losing both them and the power that came with them. Not to mention Midoriya's stunt with hawks, which Naomasa just wanted to know why. What had the point of that been, on either side? Sometimes he wished he were friends with normal people, like, he didn't know, an accountant maybe? Not that he would give Toshinori up for the world, just some normalcy would be nice too. He took a deep breath, remembered what he always told Toshinori about stress, and took a mouthful of room temperature coffee. In that 30-second period, 2 more problems presented themselves to him. 1. His cell phone began to ring, displaying the contact information for Gran Torino. 2. His email softly pinged, and a message from Principal Nezu asking for any images or videos Toshinori might have sent him into his inbox. Briefly, Naomasa considered ignoring them both. That wasn't a realistic option, and was irresponsible. Besides, it was contrary to his character. He picked the lesser of 2 evils, answered Gran Torino's call. Garaki was going to have a mental breakdown. This was fitting because his car had broken down. Midoriya Izuku was asking him if he thought that his friend might come and pick them up. If his friend had a car. This last had almost sent him into hysterics. Gigantomachia in a car. Oh. Except it wasn't funny at all, as this was almost certainly going to result in his death at the hands of All For One. No matter that he considered the man his dearest friend, he was under no illusion about what All For One would do to him over his inexcusable error. Perhaps he should cut his losses and get one of the remote-activated Nomu to come for them. Then, inexorably and inevitably, things managed to get even worse. "Stop the car!" "But you said not to—" "I know what I said. Stop the car!" Tomura twisted to see out the rear passenger window. Everybody else turned to follow his gaze, effectively blocking his view. "Get out of my way!" demanded Tomura. There was some awkward, half-hearted shuffling. "Does that look like anyone to you?" Tomura hissed. "Yeah, like the doctor," said Toga. "I've never seen him standing up, though," said Spinner dubiously. "It seems out of character." "I didn't know he owned a car," mused Compress, rubbing the bottom edge of his mask. "Not him," snapped Tomura. "The woman!" He pointed angrily at the rapidly approaching woman with green hair, narrowly avoiding dusting Mr. Compress's top hat. What about her?" asked Spinner. "Doesn't she look familiar to you?" replied Tomura. "To be honest, everyone without a mutation quirk looks kind of the same to me," answered Spinner. "Someone without face blindness?" "Oh, she looks like Izuku. Do you think that's his mum?" said Toga. The woman knocked on the window of the car, twice unhelpfully rolled it down. "Thank you so much for stopping. Oh." She took a step back. She apparently recognized them. Joy. He was going to unpack his feelings about this woman later. "Hey, Doc," rasped Tomura, annoyed. "What the hell have you been doing?" Said Garaki, finally stepping out from behind the car. "I didn't expect to see you here, Shigaraki Tomura." "Because you blew us off and stranded us in the middle of Mustafu?" "No," said Garaki, in a way that absolutely meant yes. "I knew you were resourceful enough to safely make it out of the city." "Oh yeah? Really? You?" Compress chose that moment to slam his face into the back of Tomura's head. Tomura steadied himself automatically on one of the car's upright, which cracked dangerously under his hand. He pulled back as if burned. When he looked up, the gremlin's mother was halfway to the tree line with... what was that in her hand? He looked back over his shoulder. That was Twice's goddamn mask. Compress, for some reason, was also missing his stupid mask, and covering his face like a dramatic weirdo he was. And Toga basically had hearts in her eyes. Spinner was being Spinner, and therefore 99% useless. He was lucky he was fun to play games with. Now, how to make her stop? "Hey!" he shouted. "We have your son!" This was a lie. As far as he knew, unless Darby had snatched him on his way back, it wasn't impossible, but he was a villain. The green-haired woman stopped and turned back, allowing Tomura a full view of her expression. He decided he regretted everything. "Okay," said Izuku, multitasking by letting 2 pick the lock on the league safe. Considering Gigantomachia's ability to track by smell and the questionable running water, We can't just sneak out. He'll find us. So I think our best play is getting him to attack Shigaraki, and then, when they're both distracted, we run for it. Toshinori nodded and sighed. If only we had a giant jug of perfume, we could throw it at his face and disrupt his ability to smell us. I mean, I found a bunch of garbage a way back. That isn't perfume, but it does stink, replied Izuku. No, your plan is superior. We'd draw too much suspicion if we attacked him like that. Perfume could be written off. Yeah, I can see that, because perfume is a nice thing. Indeed. It isn't actually a very nice thing to have it all over you, said Izuku. No, agreed Toshinori, it isn't. The safe popped open. I won't ask you if you don't. Deal. But anyway, assuming we do get away, what then? Where do we go? And wow, the League of Villains is broke. I almost feel bad. I was going to say Dacre, but that's too far now. And we don't know if Gigantomachia will come after us. Drawing him to a place full of civilians would be irresponsible. Yeah, said Izuku, frowning, pulling his head from the safe, and glanced out of the window. What about the wild pussycats? What about them? Asked Toshinori. They're near here, aren't they? And they've got that whole complex. So, I mean, I don't know how they feel about us right now, but it wouldn't be a terrible place to hide, would it? I'd hate to bring all of this down on them as well, said Toshinori. But, that being said, I don't believe they're actually there. They were taking some time off because of what happened to Ragdoll. That makes sense, said Izuku. Should we take the risk? I'm sure if we have a choice, my boy, we could try roughing it up, but that puts us in a very vulnerable position. And we can't stay here with the League? No, we can't. Okay, Izuku sighed, started to thumb through the League's collection of fake IDs, looking for something he could use. Wild pussycats it is. We've got to convince Makia to attack Shigaraki, and then we sneak out back while they're fighting. He shook his head. It sounds unheroic when I put it that way. Under these circumstances, I think heroic is the set of actions when no one dies. His mentor was right. Izuku still felt weird about this, though the pettiness was completely different. Not to mention, he put the last fake IDs away and massaged his temples. They're doing something weird in there, he said. I'm going to check on them. I might be out of it. Don't worry, said Toshinori, patting Izuku's shoulder. I'll keep an eye on things out here. Perhaps all of this could have gone unsaid, what with their connection, but saying things out loud made them easier to organize. Hey! Shouted Izuku over the roaring wind. Stop that! Are you gonna fight me, Nine? All by yourself? No, said Izuku, somehow contriving to look down his nose at her despite the height difference, and the fact that Tempest was floating several meters in the air. I won't have to, because I have a secret weapon. Ochako could almost see Tempest roll her eyes. And, shouted Izuku, do you seriously think I just wanted to be part of the system? Are you serious? I wanted to help people the system failed. It isn't like they're responsible for the system either. He waved his hand to indicate Ochako, Ida, Todoroki, and Aizawa. I'd argue about your hobo teacher. Is this your secret weapon? No, this is, Great Aunt Miranda. Tempest opened her mouth, then closed it again. The wind began to die down. I don't know what the point of that was. Neither do I. What's the point of this? The point is, determining whether or not you have people you can rely on, or a bunch of backstabbers who'll hand you over to a government lab as soon as it's convenient. She stabbed a finger at Ochako. She's just in heroics for money. She pointed at Ida. He's only here because it's traditional for his family. She gestured at Todoroki with her other hand. He's doing it mostly out of spite. And who knows what your hobo teacher is doing this for? There is nothing wrong with any of that, protested Ochako. You must have your own motivations too. She does, shouted Izuku. Considering what they are, you have no room to be criticizing Ida. Besides, you don't even like me. This isn't about liking or disliking you. You're the... Tempest visibly cut herself off, then took a deep breath. She set herself down on the street. Knowing what we do now about certain things, a 14-year-old would not have been my first choice. Excuse me, we're all 16, said Ida. You're 16 now. The fact of the matter is that you're children, naive children, replied the vestige. Oh my gosh, you're younger than I was when I was kidnapped and tortured. I know, but why are you taking it out on by the government that you're trying to lick the boot off? Did you see what they did to Suzuki? Ochako felt like she was spectating a very passionate tennis match. If it means anything, said Aizawa, dragging himself out of the pile of rubble he'd been thrown into by the wind. I'm just trying to keep my kids alive as long as possible. Then expel them. Stop them from becoming literal child soldiers. I do, said Aizawa. He does, confirmed Ochako, who was well acquainted with Aizawa's reputation. He really does, said Todoroki. I used to see Tensei's group chat, and every time he expelled someone, Ida shivered. Said Todoroki. Is that why you're so insistent about rules? Of course not. Rules are important regardless of why so many students were expelled during the first month of school. So, why didn't you expel these ones? Gritted the vestige. If you honestly believe the problem child wouldn't have flung himself at the first villain he saw after that and dove straight into vigilantism, you don't know him very well. He sighed, standing, and brushed dust and pebbles out of his tracksuit. That goes for these three as well. They're insane, and it's not my fault. Isn't saving others what heroes do? Asked Izuku, walking closer to Tempest. Ochako wanted to run out and grab him, but this whole ordeal had just shown how useless that would be. No matter what, continued Izuku. Not no matter what. This is why She shook her head, sighing. Not no matter what. She leaned forward, her hands on her hips. Don't die. You do realize what will happen if you do die, right? I don't have to spell it out for you. No, said Izuku. Besides which, I'm not a hero. You saved people, protested Izuku. And, as your friends pointed out, I've killed too. I know, said Izuku, but you aren't a bad person. Lots of people killed during wars, said Ochako, going to stand by Izuku. And that's what you were fighting in, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know a lot about that time, but... You wouldn't. It's been over 100 years, said the vestige. Izuku nodded. This fight isn't doing anything, though. None of us wants them here when the vault opens. The what? Asked Ida. The vault? Hopefully, said Izuku. You won't have to worry about that. The fight did do something, though, said Tempest. What? Asked Izuku. For one, said Tempest, it made you think. For the other, her eyes flicked over Ochako and the others. Everyone you fight will have their own reasons. Remember that. As they walked down the streets, Storms still brewed overhead. Ichako kept catching glimpses of children in the alleyways and cross streets. "Who are they?" she asked, unable to help herself. "My sister and I," answered Tempest. Ichako, watching the back of the woman's head, saw her twitch slightly towards one of the alleys. "About the time we were taken." "Taken by who?" asked Todoroki. Tempest laughed. The sound was entirely humorless. "That government you're so eager to serve. You've noticed, I hope, that my sister and I aren't completely Japanese?" "Yes," said Todoroki. "I'm not blind after all." "Todoroki," said Aizawa in a warning tone. "Good for you. Our mother was Japanese, Dad was American. We went back and forth to see the family. Problem was, everyone on Mum's side had quirks. We didn't even realize it. The government tracked the weather disturbances to our movements and raided our family reunion. Never saw my parents again. Never saw anyone, for that matter, except my sister and my aunt, Dad's side, who tried to smuggle us out and got shot for it. We spent 4 years in that hell before Ryuji rescued us." "You're more open about this than I would have expected," said Aizawa. Tempest sneered. "Why wouldn't I be? I'm a terrorist, and people only become terrorists if they want to make a statement, which I did. Trust me when I say this, Nine. If the Hero Commission took you into custody," she spat the word out as if it was dirty, "you'd be in the same boat. What do you think they do to all those high-profile criminals in Tartarus? The ones that are being held indefinitely in a private prison without even a show trial." "I know 3, said Izuku, far more calmly than Ichako would have been able to. "That's one of the reasons I wanted to be a hero. It's easier to change systems from the inside." "Not this system." "No," said Izuku, "but then I had no idea of this part of the system even existed. They do a lot to hide it after all." Grunted Tempest skeptically. The buildings began to thin out, interspersed with wilderness. The road rapidly narrowed into a 1-lane road, then gravel. "Is this normal?" asked Ichako. "We have more control over our environments than the other ones. You've noticed that only 8 and 9 had multiple versions of themselves running around and being confusing." "I didn't do that on purpose," said Izuku. "Exactly. Any one of us could send an army of ourselves against you. Only those 2 don't have a choice about it. Amateurs." "Shouldn't they have had the same amount of time as—" started Ichako. She broke off as a series of concrete walls topped with barbed wires rose up in front of them, scraping at the surrounding trees, shedding clumps of dirt. The trees fell away, leaving a clear, barren space between the walls and the trees. Slightly beyond the structure, moonlight glinted off the surface of a lake. "Well, welcome to Jinnoshi Lake Camp, kids." Tempest turned around, putting her hands on her lips. "This is where I met Ryuji, and," she glanced up the wall, "this is as far as I go." "You aren't going to show us where to find Ryuji?" asked Aizawa. "I promised myself I'd never go back there." She jerked her head over her shoulders. "I'm not revisiting it for you." She started walking away. "Have fun." Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry about the background noise. I've got birds in the house and I'm recording it during the day, so everyone's just awake and really loud, so it's hard for me to record quietly. But saying that, this chapter was much shorter than the previous chapter, I feel like. There's a lot less content, so maybe that's why. It was a very emotionally driven chapter, this one. Maybe that's why it felt shorter. Anyways, it was quite a good chapter, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.